yeah, December's usually. I'm starting recording because this probably actually leads on quite nicely to what we're going to start talking about.
Okay.
Um, December's normally a month where I take a lot of time off and don't ride, um, because I'm normally just really busy with family stuff, like everyone is. And the it's a strength and a weakness. But my family and my partner's family are like all over the place. Like one of the reasons we moved to the Peak District was because it's kind of really central to all of them. But it always just means everyone's a couple of hours away. It doesn't matter what direction it is; it's a couple of hours. And we're at my partner's dad's, which is Wales, as part of it. And then yeah, we're like just my family's down in Kent, and then I've got family in the Isle of Man, and like it's all over the place. So December's always a bit busy, but the reason why what I was saying like this December's a bit different is because I mean you and I are going to talk a bit about silly bike rides. Is effectively
Yep.
what I'm gonna how I would call this section: silly bike rides with Wendy and Chris. So I think this year's changed a bit on that stance because after my selection of silly bike rides this year, after Badlands, I was just fucked. Like I was so burnt out, and
Right.
that wasn't even the technically wasn't supposed to be when I was going to stop after Badlands. I still was going to do a couple of hill climbs. I was planning on racing like a small cyclocross season. And I had this organized ride with Steezy in Cold Dark North, which is around the Lake District. And I was supposed to be doing Grand Guanche, which is just finished. But I just was incredibly worn out. And I put that down to having done Badlands, the Seven Everests, riding from Newcastle to Switzerland, riding across Spain for like 20 days, and then just the perpetual build up of accumulative fatigue of all of that. And I think there's been a couple of other things that have popped in and out, like gravel champs, and I can't even think of the top of my head. Really, I was trying to like work it out recently what has happened over this last year, but it feels like it's been a big year. And anyway, after Badlands, I still having to do. I had to do one hill climb, which I already signed up for. So, and it was one that was supporting a local air ambulance. So I wanted to do that one. And then I had this ride that we organised with CZ Collective and Cold Dark North. And then that was it. And then I was like, right, I've got to pull the pin on it, otherwise I'm just going to explode. And so stopped and decided to take some time off, went on holiday, um, came back, started sort of training and riding again a couple of weeks ago. And now I'm pretty much going, I wouldn't say full steam, but semi steamed towards Atlas Mountains in February. So I say semi-steam because I'm really just going to that race to go and have fun, which is I think I seem to say that about every single race. I don't really go and race them. I just go and have a bit of a laugh and a bit of adventure. But I think there's so many different stances and like opinions of ultra races, which we'll obviously cover over time. The
Yeah.
important thing that I should say is this is Wendy. If you have ever read any of the flipping hell, my mind's gone blank now. The Dot Watcher
Sure.
reports on things like Badlands. Specifically, I'm going to bring up the Badlands one because one, I feature in the last two, and two, they're really funny. Wendy's the person that writes them. Um, and not only that, that's part of Wendy, but Wendy also has done ultras yourself and has a good sort
Yeah.
of knowledge and experience, and also comes from it, I think, well, obviously from a different angle to maybe I do, but also coming at it from the women's perspective, which I think is equally important as we're sort of starting to see a more, I think ultras is where your genetic, I guess, I don't even know if it's the right way of wording it, genetic strengths
Physiology.
and
Yeah.
weaknesses, whatever it is, it levels out. It's way more equal in men and women. That there is we know that men generally are stronger, but men are generally not as good at endurance. Like so, there's this great, amazing sort of leveler that comes with distance, and I really like that. And we've seen that in the
Mm.
past with some of the performances at Transcontinental, at Badlands, for example, where we've started to see women, being hyper competitive in those
Yeah.
races, which is amazing. Like for me, that's way more exciting than seeing a race dominated by a load of ex pros,
Right.
male ex pros, personally. But I probably get told off for saying that. But I don't know. I feel like it's come on, guys, you've had your time.
Exactly.
Let us
Exactly.
normal
Well,
people have a go.
well, we'll see how long they stick around, you know. Maybe it's just the trendy thing to do at the moment. But it is interesting how the physiology is one aspect that how the women and men's physiology we do match out when it comes to endurance. And then I think what's really interesting when you get into this area of things of endurance, the unsupported, you've got all the other problem solving, which is
Mm,
that's when you it's very much a more sort of even keel because when you look at other sports, how they've evolved, they've become very pure performance driven, which does tend to favor the male gender. Um, Whereas this is so much larger. So you have there's a much greater breadth of how you succeed in these events. So yeah, super interesting to see how it's evolving. And even now as we're getting a little, it's growing and stuff, things are changing a bit, but it's still hyper competitive from a gender perspective.
mm. And I mean, you raise a really good point there that there's definitely this aspect of all the external things, the external impacts of ultra races. And some people are like rock solid and can deal with anything that happens and goes wrong. And some people, on contrast, something small that happens and it completely throws them off the race and throws them off the pace, and sometimes can actually stop them from wanting to do an ultra again. And the kind of things I'm referring to is like heat stroke, Badlands 2021. Let's just
21.
highlight that as a
Right.
serious, serious thing for pretty much, I don't know, a third or half the field in the first day. Like
Yeah, it was huge.
it
Huge.
took
The
out
dropout numbers were massive.
it took out such a huge amount of the race. Um, or mechanicals, punches, but I'm not talking about one puncher. I'm talking about continual punches to the point where you're just like, what the fuck is going wrong here with these tires? Been there, done that. Um, Crashes, there's so many different things like incidents with local residents, incidents with dogs. Dogs are the
Right.
ones. Like, there's so many things that could then, of these external factors that can alter and change your mindset. And sometimes people, I think, relish in that and actually do really well with that. And on the flip side, some people really don't.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating because I think a lot of that comes down to experience as well, as to whether you can cope with problem solving in those situations. Um, I always like look back and think of the first ultra I ever did was Silk Road Mountain Race.
Wow.
That is one to be chucked in at the deep end to do your first one.
Yeah.
And I did it in a pair, and we didn't finish. We scratched because we did it on cyclocross bikes. So this was the first edition. I don't think anyone truly knew what anyone was in for. But a cyclocross bike is not the bike to ride Silk Road Mountain Race on.
Nope.
Um, and the reason why we scratched, actually, it wasn't to do with any fault of ourselves, like physically. We were kind of getting on all right, but I I managed to like crack. I had hydraulic brakes, disc brakes, and I managed to crack. There's like a ceramic piston.
Yeah.
This is like first generation hydraulic brakes. There's a ceramic piston in the brake caliper, and I don't know how, I don't know when, but I cracked it, and therefore I had one brake. Um, and it was the front brake that failed, so I had a rear brake. So then we filed the cable guides off because I was on a steel frame. We filed the cable guides off from the rear brake to mount it on the front just because it's nicer to descend with. And then I just didn't have a rear brake. But I had the original broken front brake caliper like strapped to my handlebars. And I could just see it the whole time, just like hanging. Um, and we got to that point, which was like coming towards, but there's a section that year, there was a section which was like basically the, I guess, like Kyrgyzstan, almost China border, which is,
Yeah.
there's nothing. And we were coming up to that section and we both sort of looked at each other and was like, is this actually stupid to do this now and to continue? Is this dangerous? Like, there's always an element of danger, but is this actually really dangerous and really stupid?
Yeah.
And I remember we sat down by, we had like some, like a little stove and some little, like freeze dried. I don't know what we call it, freeze dried food meals, camping
Yeah.
meals. We sat down, had a meal each. We had these flapjacks that were like 500 calories a flapjack. They were dense. With this meal, had a flapjack, and we sat down and we had a very serious talk about it, and both decided that ultimately it would be stupid to continue. Um, and that's what then so we scratched. So we then rode to the next town. I can't remember what it was called. Went to the shop, bought some normal clothes because we had no normal clothes, which was a pair of very skimpy running shorts and a white vest. Um, and yeah, was wearing these skimpy running shorts and a white vest. And I don't drink, but the beers in Kyrgyzstan come with a bag of peanuts, like strapped to them. So we got absolutely smashed. But I don't drink, and I was a bit pissed off. So I was like, "Fuck it, I'm gonna drink." And but all I remember was the fact that the beers had these peanut bags in them. So we just sat there eating these bags of peanuts and drinking beer. Um, and I think there's probably this thing with ultras where there's a lot of people. There is definitely people who would be prepared to take those kind of risks, and that's fine. I'm not saying that's a problem, but to me, if you're battling for like 20th, 30th place, I'd rather get home safe
Exactly.
and have a story to
Exactly.
tell. Um, if I was like battling for top five, maybe I'd care a bit more. But when it's like, mid pack of the field, it's not really that big
Yeah.
a. It's not a thing. It's not a thing. Um,
No.
we're choosing
And
to
you
do these things at the end of the day.
exactly. If you hadn't stopped, you'd have missed out on the lovely outfit, the skimpy shorts and the nice white vest. And did you have the tash at the time as well? Because that would have just kind of affected the look.
I actually had a very big bushy beard, a big bushy ginger beard, and my beard like is like browny ginger, but when it's hot, it goes very ginger, like on the like mustache chin area. So I had this big bushy ginger beard and looked like I don't even know what I looked like, but it was a strong look. It was a very strong look. Yeah, yeah. It's funny, isn't it? Because like, I mean, I think a lot of people think scratching's a bad thing, but it's not a bad thing. And I think certain races have maybe um, caused that feeling that it's a bad thing. I'm not going to name races or anything, but I have an opinion on certain races that I think have made it come across as a negative. But in my genuine opinion, that you should always look at it. Getting to the start line of any of these kind of races is an achievement in itself,
Yeah.
and then the rest of it's an adventure. And that adventure could be one day, it could be 5 days, it could be 3 weeks, it could be a month, whatever it is. Like just getting there, you like and putting your name down to say you're going to try it is a huge achievement. And whether it's your first one or your 100th one, like that should be celebrated that you've attempted it. And yes, maybe someone who's done 100 has got a better chance of finishing because they've got experience, but there's still no harm in scratching, in my opinion.
No, absolutely. It is I did TCR this year, Transcon, and I scratched due to some severe chafing issues with the main reason why I couldn't continue. But there was a lot of things that led up to it. And obviously I was a bit disappointed because I'd wanted to do the full adventure. That was my goal. It wasn't to, it wasn't to be competitive or anything. But I wanted to experience it. I wanted to go right until the end. And so I was a bit disappointed, and I got a few really, really nice messages from people saying, one was from some of the other people from Dot Watcher saying, Wendy, you've got to realize you did more than most of the races that you actually cover. You may have scratched, but you actually got further than many people do, even on those ones. And
Hmm.
someone else who's not in this community, a friend who doesn't do any of this kind of stuff at all, he's like, you did way more than 99% of the world. 99% of the world don't even sign up for these things. You made it to Munich. Like that's a big thing, to be proud of yourself. And it's true. And there's a lot to take away from any part, from just the moment that you say, this is something that excites me. I want to do this. wherever it goes from there, there's so much to take away from that. And that's what I think that's what's really beautiful about these sports and these communities, is that it offers so much to people. And it's super, super interesting. Yeah. But yeah, so no, scratching is not a bad thing. And sometimes it is most definitely the right thing to do. Like in your case, as you know, good old Nelson, he will always give us a route that takes you somewhere incredibly remote. You do have to ask yourself these questions. Or it could be like Badlands in 2021. That was a tough year. That was a really, really tough year. And I think a lot of people met their ego very quickly. A lot of people
Yeah,
came into that race thinking
yeah,
it wasn't as tough as what it was. And it's not, it's a tough race. And that heat wave was just horrendous. It took so many people out. And a lot of people, there was a couple of racers who struggled to admit that it was heat stroke as well. There was a few
mm.
that still convinced that they had dodgy water or something, but it was quite severe heat stroke. It's what happened.
I remember. So last year's Badlands, I've I really like the race. I really like it. I love that part of Spain. I think a lot of it is for me because I really love that part of Spain. It's like the place that I don't know, since I started cycling, it's a place I've ended up going to quite a lot because the weather's always good, and I think the riding's incredible there. The food's amazing. The hospitality is incredible. People are just very lovely, caring. You're cycling along and there's a car behind you. They'll just sit there. They don't care. And I love that. I love that kind of attitude. Um, and so I went into 2021 off the back of an injury, which had pretty much like scuppered me, I think, for like 3 or 4 months, which was I sustained it at the national 100-mile time trials where it was like, it's a knee problem. It's like a recurring problem I've had for a long time. And I've actually made a report of spending a lot of time trying to strengthen and sort that issue out. And it's been pretty good. It's been pretty good. It's been expensive. I've tried every single shoe brand in the world because shoes, knees, it's all related. Anyway, so I went into that edition of Badlands kind of going, fuck it, I've bought my flights, booked the hotel. I'm just going to go and I'm going to try and finish. And that was always the goal for me, was to finish. I didn't really care where I came. I just wanted to make sure I finished. And I think myself and a huge proportion of the field did not expect the temperatures. I don't even think the organisers expected it to be as ridiculously hot as that. Um, I don't know officially what the temperatures were, and I take it with a pinch of salt as well, but because bike computers end up sitting in the sun, but mine recorded 54 degrees at one point.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, I mean, I'm someone that doesn't, I'm not bad in the heat. Like, it doesn't seem to affect me too much compared to a lot of people. And I don't know why. I actually quite like riding when it's really hot. But I remember thinking, oh, it's a bit spicy. And then there was a section, was it in Garaffi? I think it's in Garaffi, where there's like this like tower just in the middle of nowhere, and there's just people. I remember riding up to it, and it was, I could laugh about it now, but at the time I thought, fuck, this is quite bad. There was like this line of people in the shadow of the tower of like 10, 20 people just lying there. And I remember thinking, that's not very good. And I went there and stopped for like, I think like 5 minutes, had some water, checked that everyone was all right, and then just carried on because I was like, might as well carry on. And then I was really, really proud of myself for finishing that one because like towards the end of it, I couldn't even really walk, let alone ride. I was in a lot of pain towards the end, and but the last day of riding, I was like, well, I was pretty determined that I was going to finish and just wanted to see it out and then deal with the consequences afterwards. When I guess, like in contrast for this year, I had a right laugh. I had a great time. I was quicker, first of all, so that's a success as far as I was concerned. In a similar kind of way, I think I had 2 weeks' notice that I was going, because Schwalbe kind of kindly offered me a place to go, but I think it was about 2 weeks before they were like, "Oh, do you fancy doing it?" And like, I feel very lucky that I could go into. I feel very lucky that and confident in myself that I could be 2 weeks out from something like that. Go, yeah, I'll bugger it, I'll go like that, and I'm very lucky that I could be in that kind of situation to be able to do that. But equally, I went into it thinking, well, I still can't really race this because I've not prepared for it at all. I'm not. It's not been on my radar things to do really. But I'll just go and have a laugh again. I kind of like refine the setup from the previous year from what I've learned. Um, and then I flew out and I was really sick. Like I had a like bit of food poisoning or something. And the day that I landed, I was really, really sick. But I don't really know why. And I thought, well, when the race started, because I think I flew out a couple of days early, and then when the race started, I was like, well, if the legs are good at the start line, that says the stance of how the race is going to go. And you know that in like the first 100K, if they're good or not good. Um, if they're not, I'm just going to have fun. That was, I'm going to get around, have a laugh. And I think in that first 100K, I quite quickly knew that my legs were not good, as in they're just a bit tired and just not where I'd prefer them to be. And I just sort of went, cool, fine, it's what it is. Just carry on and finish. And then ended up having a great adventure, meeting some really cool people.
Yeah.
Um, and people I'd known for a long time, but actually people who have now become, genuine, I think, friends for life because of that shared suffering and riding,
Yeah.
you know, through the night at points. And there was a couple of people who were a bit like, oh, you're riding solo, but you're riding with other people. And yes, I understand what you're saying. But also, back to my original argument, when you're riding in like 30th, 40th place, no one gives a shit, really.
Right.
The only people who and the people around you don't give a shit. There's no like in that situation. There's no one who's like you're all kind of traveling at the same kind of speeds. You all kind of need to stop at the same kind of time. You all are tired at the same points. It just ends up being. And anyone who's been in those situations in an ultra will probably say a similar kind of thing. Um, and I guess my mentality as I've got older has changed. That I, I'm not competitive on people. The only person I am competitive with, or that I ever feel I have to prove anything to, is myself. Like
Right.
I don't really care. That sounds like a bit of a dick thing to say, but I don't really care what other people think. Like to me, I just want to go out and have an adventure, um, explore, enjoy it. Maybe if I was going to something with that mindset of wanting to race it, it'd be different. But that this edition of Badlands this year was never going to be that. It never was. And what I really love about David is that I think what they've created with that race is a race that's actually very um, you can make it as hard as you want to make it. So if you want to
Yeah.
try and win it and you want to do it in like 2 days, you could do that. You can make it that hard. But equally, if you want to go and like tour it and you
Yeah.
want to do it in I think it's 8 days in total, you can do that as well. Like
Yeah.
it's like 100K a day,
Yeah.
and everywhere in between.
Yeah.
And
It's a
sorry,
it's a super accessible race, and I think there's a couple of things like you say. He's done really well. David and Azar have done really really well to make it that way. The distance is a nice distance. It's not too much. Like that is doable by most people. The elevation isn't too bad. The terrain is relatively okay. There's nothing out there that's super scary. You don't have any crazy hiker bikes or landslides or anything crazy like that. It's super doable. But I think it is like what you're saying. He's not so fussed about if there's a bunch of you riding together, if you're, in mid pack. It's more about you going out there and having a great experience and you challenging yourself and
mm,
seeing, what are you able to do. And it's not like you're really going to be drafting very much anyway on the route. So you're not really going to get much advantage. And like you say, you cross it, there's 250 people that do this. So you're going to run into people at various points. There's limited supply points. You're going to be all stopping at the same shop, washing in the same fountain.
mm,
It's just going to happen. It's not, and he knows that that's not what's important. And the guys at the front are the ones that they're at the pointy end. They're doing their stuff. They want to get there under 48 hours, and that's cool. And they push themselves, and that is a bit more supervised. It is a bit more recorded, but everybody else, he just wants to make sure that everyone's out there having a good time, challenge themselves, because there are still some sections which they're pretty juicy, they're pretty spicy. Especially with resupply and stuff, you've got to think it through. You can't just wing it. But yeah, it's a really really nice race, and then David and Azar are just super nice people, which is always really nice.
yeah, they're I think what they've done is they've really created a community. Like there's very few. I've always said in the past that once I've done a race, I wouldn't do it again, and now I'm going for the third time.
The time.
It says a lot. That really does say a lot. And part of that is because of them, but also the other part of it is I know they're changing the route for 2023. I don't know in what way, shape, or form, but the differences from 2021 to 2022, 2021 was a harder edition to race in terms of the terrain and the temperature, of course, but the terrain was harder. 2020. Wait, we are in 2022, aren't we? We are. God,
Yeah. Yeah.
COVID years. I know it's not necessarily a COVID year, but it still feels like it. I don't know what year it is. Anyway, this edition, the one that's just gone, it felt like the route had been really nicely refined. Some of the bits that were just a bit silly were taken out, and like it's funny because everyone talked about like the beach hiker bike bit in Badlands and was bringing it up as this like monster thing this year, and I was like, you should have done it last year. Last year pissed all over this year's one.
Yeah.
Like last year was unnecessary,
Yeah.
but this year it was kind of like a nice little nod to it, and that just made it overall more enjoyable and ultimately a faster race.
Yes.
But there was also, refinements of certain sections of the route where in 2021 there'd be points where you would deviate off the route, do like a little squiggly bit, and then basically join back on to like a road, and it'd be pretty much join back onto it at the same point that you left it. And it was like those kind of things just felt a bit unnecessary. But as I say, they really enhanced and improved the route for this year. So I'm really excited to see what they do for 2023. And I think that they are really, doing not just an incredible event and a race, they're building a great community. And they're also, thinking about the fact that we're showcasing a part of Europe that is being highly affected by the warming of the planet and highlighting that to people. And I think the 2021 temperatures really, for me, was a real eye opener to it, to be honest with you. It's always been on my mind, but 2021 made me go, shit, this isn't that far away. And it's 50 degrees here. This is ridiculous. And all of their sort of community outreach projects, their replantation stuff that they're doing, that's incredible. It's really incredible. So it's a race organizer that not only is putting on a great race and hopefully in the future additional races, but they are, they're very aware of the impacts of what they're doing, the impacts of people flying into that race, and the potential to, I guess, on how to counterbalance that and the CO2 emissions that come out of that. And I think that's great. And, we've seen similar things with some other race organizers, for example, GB Giro with a no-fly policy. And I think that the more people that understand the impacts of that, the better, really. I think that the stance of Badlands, the stance of GB Giro, that's great. It's a really interesting and thoughtful stance about how things should evolve going forward.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a newer organizer in Europe as well, the Poco guys. They're in France. They're based in France. It's two ultracyclists, Caroline, I can never remember her last name, and Harold. He did Trans-Iberica last year, and I think he did something this year. Caroline did the TCR this year as well. They've set up Poco and they've deliberately done it that the start and finish is at a central hub where you can get the train or the bus really, really easily. And they don't go as far as like GB Giro where you cannot fly, but they definitely encourage everybody to and think about sort of plastic use. And they do a lot of work around that. And they're also doing a lot to try and bring families into it as well. So they do shorter weekends and stuff like that. So it's really nice. It seems to be catching on. And even for the organizers that aren't putting in definitive rules, they're definitely talking about it. They're saying, can you think about it? I was speaking with one of the organizers, Bruno Ferraro, a couple of weeks ago, who had a fantastic idea, which I'm going to put out there for him because he wants somebody to take this forward. But is there somebody that could build a platform where it's basically like a car sharing platform per event? So riders, because we all come from different places, come into this one place. Could somebody who's going with a van say, I'm traveling from Luxembourg to Badlands. I've got space for 2 people and 2 bikes. If you want to come with me, and it's sort of like a blah blah car type thing, but specific to each event. And I think it's really nice because the community is really proactive, and I'm sure we'll see like something come out of this, even if it's just like a WhatsApp group or whatever. But that's definitely becoming much more a central part of the dialogue, which is really, really encouraging, and it's nice to see.
I remember, I think I can't remember if it was Badlands this year or last year, but I was trying to work out a way of liaising with Martin and Mike, because they offered me to jump in their van, but it was getting to Amsterdam and then traveling down. It was like, it all just became awkward and couldn't make it work effectively. But the fact that people are talking about it is good. Like, it's a step in the right direction. And cycling as a sport should be really good, but it isn't. From the pro level all the way down to ultra cycling, it isn't. It's not good. The production of bikes is not great. The production of components is not great. The fact that they use a lot of oils is not great. They're plastic, a lot of them. It's not great. Metal production produces a lot of CO2. That's not great. Tires are rubber. Rubber's not great. The pro peloton, every team has about 20 cars that travel around in convoy. That's not great. I could carry on going. I'm not going to, because I think people will call me a bad person for being negative. But it's so ironic that an object which is effectively, free to ride, and in terms of it's not costing you petrol or fuel or anything like that, actually, realistically, when you look at the bigger picture of it, is something that is still quite high up there in the terms of pollutants. And because of the travel and the logistics associated with it, I completely understand how. I'm prime example. I'm going to go to Tenerife later. Like, I don't like the winter. I really don't like the winter. I find it really hard, and not mentally, I struggle with it. The dark mornings, dark evenings, and physically, I just don't like riding outdoors when it's cold, because I really struggle with the cold. So I end up spending a lot of time with a turbo trainer, which is soul destroying. But I do think it helps build your resilience quite a lot. So there's an ebb and flow. But like, I completely understand and empathize why people want to go and ride in nice warm countries. I get it, but there is a give or take, and the more people can do generally, the better it will help in the long term. Like, I think we need to all be a bit more aware of the global situation. And I'm not saying cycling's a huge problem on the scale of other problems going around. It's actually quite small, but there's a little bit that everyone can do that will hopefully help things, like long term, I guess. Yeah,
definitely.
So, go on, off to you.
So Tenerife is all in preparation for Atlas Mountain Race then, to get you out there and get some sun miles in.
Yeah, so sorry, my dog's just turned up. Hey, you right, buddy? Yeah, the intention is Marshall, come in. Up, up, up. Hey! Yes, I'm wearing big headphones and they're really weird. I know, it's very strange. Yeah, the intention with Atlas Mountains, I'm gonna go to Tenerife and have a couple of days. I'm not taking the mountain bike. I'm gonna take the gravel bike. I'm gonna take a mountain bike to Atlas Mountains, but I really enjoy riding my gravel bike, and I'm going out there for motivation miles and good vibe miles. Something's just kind of like, I guess, help with my head more than anything. I've had a bit of a shit run of things recently, and just want something that's a bit more an opportunity just to get some sun on my back, sun on the back of my hands, and enjoy riding a bit, get some long days in, because it's quite hard to get long days in the bike when the weather's not great. But for me, I would previously in the past, I've normally done things where a group of us have like driven down to Spain and stayed in Spain for a couple of weeks, and then trained out in Spain and ridden around in Spain. But you can't really drive to Tenerife very easily. It's an island, and we live on an
Yeah.
island. Well, the UK is an island as well, so it's all kind of a bit tricky. And I've never been to Tenerife, so it feels quite nice to go back. And then also with the mindset of knowing that I've got Grand Guanche in March, so
Right.
I don't even know if that's how you pronounce it.
I have no idea. No, I think it's Grand Guanche, I think, maybe. I'm not sure. Yeah.
It sounded better than my attempt. I'm gonna ask. Mateo, I think is the organizer. I need
Yeah,
to like get him
yeah.
to spell it out, like literally spell it out. Um, but yeah, like I think that there's, for me, I did Atlas Mountains the first edition. I seem to do a great reputation of picking the wrong kind of bikes for Nelson's races.
Right.
Always in the mindset that it's doable on a gravel bike or a cyclocross bike. But I think his races really are mountain bike races.
Yeah.
You can do them on like a if you've got I think if you've got a gravel bike which has suspension forks and mountain bike wheels and tires, it's probably doable. To be honest, but um,
They're
I'm
rough
just going.
ride though.
Yeah, exactly, and not
Yeah.
necessarily the best kind of position. Drop bar bikes that tend to be a bit more aggressive than a mountain bike. So I'm going to go this year. So when I did the first edition, I did it on a gravel bike. Which had a type of suspension fork. I don't want to badmouth the brand, but I really didn't like them. Um, and I crashed really quite badly. And that was a situation where uh, I was wearing a white jersey, and my mate dared me to wear a white jersey. And I was like, this is a terrible idea because it's like the sort of kit that's just going to be ruined by the end of it. But I was like, fuck it, wear a white jersey. Anyway, that jersey is an Attacus jersey. It's now hanging up in their office with blood splats, sand, dust all down it. So yeah, it looks great. It's in a frame. I don't think it'd be wise to open that frame. So yeah, I had a bit of a bad crash and like really jarred my back quite badly. And so similar kind of thing. Like I thought, do I carry on, potentially make an injury worse, or do I scratch? And I got to the third checkpoint, I think. I can't remember now. And a friend of mine was the person stamping the brevet cards, and she looked at me, and I rolled in there looking very fragile and not in a particularly good way, cut it up, bruised up, and she looked at me and was like, "I'll stamp your card, but I think you should consider what you're going to do now." And I was like, "That's all right. Like, I'll get going. Like, I'll carry on." She said, "Well, why don't you stay here and have a bit of food?" I was like, "Okay, that sounds like a good idea. I'll stay and have some food." And we then I was looking at the bike, and another rider was like, "You've cracked your rim." And I was like, "Oh, I did not know that." So I had a massive crack going like that way around the rim. Um,
Mm.
so how could I explain it to someone? Like the U of the rim, there was a crack going around the U of the rim, and I hadn't realised. Um, he's got a tennis ball. Oh, Marshall, that's a nice tennis ball. Can you be quiet with it, please? Yes. So I hadn't realised, and so I was like, okay, cool. Well, there's loads of other scratch riders here. I I could continue if I like borrowed someone else's wheel, get it back to him at the end. I could probably work out a way to continue. Yes, I'm kind of out of the general classification, but it'd be quite cool to continue. Anyway, took the wheel out. We then tried to shove another wheel in, and then that's when we found out that the frame was bent. It's a steel frame. And then I was like, okay, cool. I really shouldn't be continuing at this point.
Yeah.
Like the bike is well totaled. So my friend was like, Marshall, be quiet, please. Can you hear his tennis ball?
A little
I
bit, yeah.
hate tennis balls with. Wait, come here. He's just looking at it. My dog's giving me this like side eye, like, what? What's wrong? I'm not doing anything wrong. Um, so I yeah, so I've basically kind of realised that it's not an example of it would be dangerous to continue. Um,
Yeah.
so riding on a bent frame is problematic. So I chose not to continue with that. Marshall, come here. Give me that tennis ball. Give it to me. Give me that tennis ball. Come on. Come here. Oh man, the look I'm getting right now is like I don't know if you
You're
can
like,
see.
oh
He's
yeah, no.
this little. Come here. Come here. Don't drop it there because I can't get it, you dingbat. You can have this, but you can't have this. Problem solved.
Excellent.
Now he's gonna whinge at me. Anyway, uh, I'm sorry, buddy, but I'm busy. He's literally looking
He's
at me
not.
like he's looking at me
He's
like,
not impressed.
what do you mean you're busy? You can't be busy right now. It's just time for dinner.
Right.
Uh, this is the joys of having a puppy. Come here.
Very adorable puppy.
He's very adorable, but my God, he's also a pain in the ass if he gets a tennis ball. Um, I get it. Tennis balls are lovely, aren't they? You can come up. Up. Tennis balls are lovely, but they're very loud. Yes, they are. Anyway, um, so yeah, so I chose not to continue doing the race. I do think it was the right decision. Same example. There's no harm in scratching, especially in a situation where safety I think is more important than people maybe realize. And as I think I've previously said, and I think we've both sort of said with yourself with TCR, like we choose to do these kind of things. Your own safety
Right.
is like fundamental to this
Yeah.
kind of thing, and also being able to continue and do another one and have the
Right.
motivation to do another one.
Exactly. Exactly. Which is, and it's interesting. And one of the things we said that we might speak about is sort of like, is there a concept of an entry level ultra? Like if you wanted to come in and do a first ultra, does that exist?
Mm.
And it's an interesting concept because dive, some people do, like yourself, you did Silk Road as your first one, if you're going to pick something that that's pretty high up there, and there's kind of the mythology around Fiona as well, how she won TCR, it was her first ultra, not that she hadn't come in, she's done a lot of stuff before that, but that was her first official ultra. So you can come into these big challenges and you can do them if you want to, but I think there is options now. It's been wonderful over the last couple of years, the number of races that have been created. And I think now there is actually a greater scope for if you just want to test the waters and see what it's like. There's a few different things out there. Like if you want to, for example, if you don't have much time, so you don't want to commit to doing something that's like 7 or 8 days or more, there's some like Dead Ends and Cake, which is just a weekend. It's like 3 days. You've got the travel a day either side, but it's like 3 days. It's 500K. That's pretty much in the scope of a lot of people. There's a ton of rallies now as well. So if you want to feel what it's like to go a really long distance, but without the pressure of the rules and not being able to support somebody else or be supported or like talk to people and all that kind of stuff, you just want to experience what it's like to do it. There's a bunch of those, and there's like the Dales Divide in the UK, which is a really great one where the organizers actually promote supporting each other. So it's that you can get to the end and you can experience what it's like and do what it's like. And then you've got other ones which are maybe a shorter distance, like the Seven Serpents Quick Bite, which is about 500-ish K. I can't remember what the elevation is, but it's a good, it's enough, but it's over a longer period of time. So you can cruise it. So you still have to do it within the rules. It's still a race as such. So you still got to respect the rules, but it gives you a bit more leeway, and it's not as remote, like it's Slovenia and Croatia. These are places where there's always somebody that you can go to. There's a town or something. It's pretty easy, and it's easy to get there, get home and stuff from there as well, so there's a lot more now, I think, where you can, if you're just kind of curious, you want to dip your toes in, you can do it without having to feel like you have to chuck yourself into one of the big ones and find out whether like halfway through maybe you don't like it, or that something you didn't get right, and then you're like, shit, if I'd known that beforehand, I might have actually been able to get to the end of this race, like could be a kit question or route planning or whatever it happens to be. So yeah, no, I think now there's a lot more for people that just want to give it a go and see what it's like, and hopefully then move on to something a bit bigger afterwards.
I guess there's also that battle of like there's several different sort of races out there, isn't there? So you've got
Yeah.
the stance of going road, I guess gravel, mountain bike, first of all, the kind of more obvious way of thinking. But also the big one for me that always stands out is plan your own route, pre-planned route.
Yeah.
And personally, I prefer a pre-planned route because it's one less thing to think about, and you are doing a route that the organizer has spent a lot of time and effort and research to showcase their country or whatever it is. Like Pan Celtic's a great example of it. They spend so much time researching and understanding and choosing to go to certain places because of there's some historic interest there or some relation to some Celtic history. And I think that's fantastic because you're being shown something while you're doing these events that the organizer really believes is important. Um, Badlands, as I keep referring to it again because it's the one I love, but like same thing. They highlight the deserts, the fact that there's deserts in Europe, and I know only one of them's classified as a desert, but come on, it's basically riding in a desert for the majority of the race. Um, and there's those starts, and I mean personally, I think the pre-planned routes are way. I think that opens it up much more to a different audience, maybe a more someone who's new to ultra cycling because I know you know when I've debated looking at doing some of these planned ultras, I've just sat there and thought, God, this sounds. Or the ones, sorry, when I've looked at doing ones where you have to plan the routes, and I've planned routes to think whether it was like whether it was on my radar to do, and I've just thought that this is just an additional stress which I don't need right now.
Yeah.
And then having to then start acting and reacting to problems and issues on the fly
Yeah.
can get quite full on. Transcontinental is an example of that as one of those races where you could have planned your route and then there could be a road closure and there's
Right.
nothing you don't know anything about that until you get there, or
Yeah.
said road might be a gravel road or a mountain bike trail. Like there's tons of different examples of it. um but I'm not by any means saying that's a bad thing. It appeals to a different kind of person, of course. And I think it's great that you sort of reference there some like dead ends and cake, for example, which is some well, we know people that have done that, and it sounds like they had an amazing time.
Yeah.
You get cake at the end of every dead end. I mean, come on, that sounds fantastic, doesn't it?
What's
Like,
not to love? Exactly. And that is a free route one. So you do get to, and he's open. You can free route whatever you. So if you wanted to mountain bike it, you can. You want to gravel, you can. You want to road, you can. It's really up to you. And because it's only 500k, it's not as intensive because the route planning it's a significant part of an event. For TCR, I think I estimated I probably spent about 80 hours doing my route, and I still wasn't happy with my route come
yeah,
the day that I rolled out. It's a significant amount of effort. Yeah, so I think that sort of planned versus free route is definitely something to consider for anyone that might be getting into just wanting to give it a go. But yeah, I'm pro dead ends and cake, and dead end. I'm hoping to do dead ends and dolce this year. Is my that's my I'll find out tomorrow whether I got in. But yeah, and he's Dominique. He sets up such a great environment for it
yeah,
as well. It's a really welcoming, nice first experience if you wanted to try something. It's really,
nice,
really good.
nice. And then um, some of the routes and stuff that the guys from Outdoor Provisions have done have been, they're great sort of entry events and opportunities. And I think those chaps are just very chilled at how people do stuff. Like I love that. I love that kind of attitude. It's like put the routes out there, go do it at your own pace, do it when you want. We're also going to organize a day where we want everyone to finish at the same time. We don't really care about when you start it, but it'd be really good to have everyone at this finish at the same time to have a finishers party. And I love that kind of attitude. It's a bit of a twist on what we see at some other events, definitely. But equally, I think completely valid. I think I can't remember what was it the one that Rafa did. Is it the Pennine Rally?
Yeah.
Which is the idea of that about the camaraderie and finishing it and riding it and experiencing it and not having to rush it. And like Liam Yates is a friend of mine, and my God, he got some stick for treating it like a race. I think that was last year, like literally racing it hard and full gas. And I think he did the same this year as well.
Right.
Even Rafa were like trolling him for it, saying it's not a race in like their
It's a
posts and stuff.
rally.
Yeah, which I thought was quite good. Um, what would be your like? I get asked it a lot, and I'd imagine you've probably been asked it quite a lot as well. What would be like your a piece of advice that you'd give to someone who is looking at doing an ultra?
I think it depends on what their why is. Because we all come into this initially with maybe from different reasons. For some people, it might be the physical challenge. Maybe you want to see physically what are you capable of. For other people, it might be the mental challenge. It might be the sort of I've never pushed through something as hard as this. Can I push through there? For some people, it might be as simple as just I've never slept outside at night. I don't know if I can do it, or I don't like riding my bike at night. Can I do this as part of this? And I think that understanding your why is maybe the like getting really in on that, because like you say, there's no matter what you do, no matter which one of these you do, whether it's 500k or 4000k, at some point you're going to hit a low. You're also going to hit some super highs, and that's the great bit that goes with it, but you're going to hit a low, and you're going to meet yourself pretty quickly, and that's the moment you've got to know, why are you out there on the bike? And if you're doing this for somebody else, if you're doing it to compete in the sense of to beat somebody else, you may, at those moments, you may ask yourself, is this really why I want to be out here? So I think getting really close to understanding what your why is. And if you're not 100% sure, then, if it's just like, it sounds kind of cool, I like these people, or, I want to eat the cake, I want to go and cycle to a place and eat cake, that's cool. It doesn't have to be this life-changing, life-affirming sort of thing. It can be
Yeah,
really, really simple. It can just be like, I like riding my bike, I like this part of the world, I'm really kind of interested, but know why you're out there. So I don't know if it really fully answers your question, but it's maybe it will, and it also, because sign up to getting to the start line is still quite a long period of time, and you've got to get through a minimum amount of training. You've got to slog through sorting out your kit, and I know there's a lot of crap that goes into it that's not fun, that you have to do before you can get there, sorting out your insurance and stuff like that. There's just a lot of, I mean, some people like that stuff, but that's fine. They can keep doing it. So you just need to remind yourself, like, what's going to be the reason why when you get to the end, you can be like, yeah, that was pretty cool, because you'll learn a lot more, and you'll experience so much more and meet wonderful, beautiful, really amazing people. So that's going to happen no matter what. But knowing why you want to be there at the beginning is, I think, really important. Will get you through to the end.
I think that's a
Does that kind of
really
answer the question?
yeah, no, I think it really does. I think that's a really important way of thinking about it. Like, I think for me, it was always about seeing places that I wouldn't normally see. And I think fundamentally that has always been a huge factor. And then originally it was a competitive edge, like I was competitive, but it's kind of more changed to being competitive with myself as opposed to being competitive with anyone else. And seeing what I can do. Like, I'll put it out there very openly. Like, I put way more of myself physically and mentally into the charity projects than I would for any ultra race. But it's a different thing for me. It's a completely different thing. There's a personal connection. Um, he's now whinging. He's been pestering me because he like wants to. He's been trying to get attention. He's been trying to jump on my lap. Now he's whinging because he wants to now go outside. So I'm going to open the door for my dog.
Okay.
I will be 1 second. I'm hoping that this headphone cable was long enough. Do you want to go out? Go on.
Looking good.
There we go. Convenient. There's one good thing about these headphones is the cable is about 500 meters long. Um. Anyway. No, I think that why question is really, really important. I really do. And you sort of mentioned it very loosely, the things that people that are boring but are really important. Insurance, you know, it's expensive. It is expensive. If you want to make sure you're properly covered, it's not cheap. But my God, there is definitely worth making sure you've got that insurance done. I've always found like mountaineering kind of insurance companies really good. I can't remember I think it's like Nomad Insurance. I think there's one I've used quite a few times. A lot of races request that you have a doctor's note. Quite often now, you have to pay for a doctor's note.
Yep.
I'm lucky that I've got a cousin that's a doctor. Really helpful. But get a doctor's note, get a health checkup, and make sure you get that done, and get it done sooner rather than later, because they're always the things that kind of catch you off guard.
Yeah.
Now, the equipment list and that sort of thing, I don't think that whatever race it is, that you're never gonna nail it. You're never ever gonna nail it, and you can get close, but there's always going to be one or two things. There always is. I don't think any one I've done, I've nailed it. There's always been something I've gone, why didn't I take that? Or why have I taken this as opposed to this? Um, I can point out the faults of several, like Badlands this year. I didn't take a sleeping bag. I took a silk liner and a bivy bag, thinking it's going to be a similar kind of temperature to last year. It was really not at night. It was 3 degrees, and I froze my nuts off. Badlands the year before didn't take enough water, like most people, because no one expects it to be as hot as it was. And I think I had too hard a gear. I didn't have an easy enough gear. But that, I learned the lesson, changed my gear ratios for this year. Atlas Mountains, completely wrong bike. Should have been on a mountain bike. Silk Road, completely wrong bike. Should have been on a mountain bike. You and in terms of like kit, and like with Silk Road, we took a tarp, bivvies, and sleeping bags, and it snowed on the first night, and we were like, "Yep, we fucked up. This is not the setup to have." We chose a tarp as opposed to a tent because it was just lighter. And then on the first night in our bivvies and sleeping bags on the side of a mountain, freezing, realizing we'd really mucked up that suggestion. But then the next day it was boiling hot, so swings and roundabouts. You're never going to nail it, and I think also understanding that your bike packing bags, whatever you're using, you will probably change them every single race. They are expensive, but that's just the nature of it. Unfortunately, some last very well, and I'm very lucky to get to work at Tailfin. I will put it out there and say I bought the first Tailfin I had, so because I thought it was really cool, and then subsequently, now part of their R&D division. But I bought it because I thought it was a smart solution to a problem, which was a swaying saddlebag, which used to piss the hell out of me. I just get really annoyed with it. There is other solutions now that can solve those kind of problems. You can get all these little frames and stuff which you can add onto your saddle, which support them. A well-packed saddlebag shouldn't sway as much, but these are all things that you learn over time. But you're never gonna. That equipment list will change until the start line, pretty much. There'll be something like you're always taking something out or adding something, and the worst bit is if you see other riders and you see what they have or don't have. And that's when you really start to question yourself. Like I was staying with Sebastian, who won Badlands this year, and he had nothing on his bike, and it made me go, "Oh, maybe I should be taking less." But then on the flip side, I went, "I'm already taking a hell of a lot less than I took the year before, and I'm not going to finish it as quick as him. So that's fine." It's just like you're never going to nail it. Is there one thing you've taken on any of your adventures and you thought, why the hell did I pack this?
I don't know. Because I've been adventurous, so I've been what we used to call touring back in the day, which is now bike packing, etc. For quite and hiking. I did a lot of hiking, and I still do. And I've got much better over the years. I remember we did me with one of my old partners. We toured Nova Scotia in Canada on the bikes, and I did take an excessively large pan pot, I don't think was quite necessary. I don't know. I think I probably had some visions of like getting mussels from the beach out there or something, or a lobster, like going just pulling a lobster out of the sea and cooking it or something. So that was slightly excessive, and I've got much better as go along. Um, I think one thing that I still haven't got fully nailed, and I've still got to figure out before I get to Atlas, is my charging situation, because I'm not 100% confident with my lights, and I don't know, with it being a mountain bike race, whether dynamo is really a good option with it. So I've still got to sort that out. We're only 9 weeks away. That's my big one. And then my other thing is what I've been struggling with a lot lately is fueling, just
Yeah,
consistent fueling, and especially in the off-road environment, because
yeah,
it's just a lot harder to actually just get the food into your mouth regularly
yeah.
and eat. So I've still got to get that sorted, which I'm not 100% sorted on at all.
Yeah, so I have always ridden with a dynamo, everything,
Yeah.
off-road, road, whatever it is, I've always ridden with a dynamo. And I've got one of the K-Light light things. Like I bought it, it was really expensive, but it's very good. Um, and the reason why I think it's good is because the simplicity of the setup of going that you kind of get it all pre-wired, and there's a little like junction box bit which you can then plug a battery pack into it and charge the battery pack. Rear light is tiny, really really good. I did previously use the USE exposure lights, and the light's good, but charging from it just wasn't so good. I found it a bit temperamental, but the
Yeah.
whole K-light system and how it's done, I think is really, really good. The USE ones may have improved since I use them. Don't know. But yeah, the K-light one I've been really impressed with. It is expensive, but it seems to work really well. And I've used it
Yeah.
for two Badlands and Atlas Mountains, the
Okay.
first one. And then at the same time, I've always had like an additional head torch. What's the brand head torch I have? I can't think of the name of the brand, but the head torch I've had, I've used it for both Badlands. I've been really, really impressed with it. It's been really good. It was like a mid. I wouldn't say it was like a crazy expensive one, but it definitely wasn't a cheap one. It was like 60 quid
Right.
maybe.
Okay.
And then I've always taken like a spare like exposure rear light and exposure front light as like I've got one of the big Diablos, I think it is, the massive exposure front
Yeah.
light. For me, I've always found, especially off road, because I'm not the most. I would say I'm an amazing descender off road, but I'm not definitely not the most confident. And being able to see more of the road, it's just flooding it with light really has helped me. So that's why I take dynamo light, massive exposure light, and the head torch, and just use them all, and then
Yeah.
tend to then charge them in the daytime. The head torch I normally put, I found lasted 2 day, like 2 nights, quite well. And then the front exposure light, I'd whack it on so it's charging into the battery pack during the daytime, and then the head
Right.
torch I'd charge it then probably the second night at night, and that's how I just kept like rotating things. And so, but the key was having a really good, like large battery pack as well. And
Yeah.
there's tons of brands out there, but I've always ended up buying this brand called Zendure, who make
Okay.
like you can run over them in a car, like they're pretty bomb proof. And they're not as saying they're not the cheapest battery packs, but I've been using them for years, like 10 years, and they've always been really really good. And I've got three various different ones, and the oldest one, which is probably 10 years old, is only just now not quite charging as well as it was, and
Oh,
that's
that's
pretty
pretty good.
impressive.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's always been my thing with like with lights and stuff. Is just making sure you flood as much of it as possible when having spares, just in case. And then with fueling, like uh, obviously my mate start is a guy that runs and has Styrkr. I don't care that I'm plugging him. Christian's a lovely man. I love him to pieces. Um, and he's got a great accent. And we met at Badlands in 2021, and that's how our friendship started. As we met there,
Mm.
and we ended up riding alongside. He was in pairs, and then I was on my own. And we ended up riding a bit together, but he was testing the original Styrkr carb solution at Badlands and the gels, the original versions of them. And it was kind of like his way of validating that the product was right, which worked really well. And he was also testing what's now their chamois print they've released, but he left the pot on a tree stump and forgot about it, and only realised a day later that he didn't have it anymore. Which he's
Oops.
yeah, that's a big oops. So that didn't get tested quite as well. But before, so I've always found that putting as much like carb solution in drinks is really, really good. I've for years I've done
Yeah.
it. Like before doing stuff with Styrkr, I was like buying like maltodextrin stuff, which is basically like sugar. The dilute is pretty much
Yeah.
sugar, putting it into water. It's how I would feel 24-hour time trials. Just do it liquid based, and then subsequently add in a peanut butter and jam sandwich because it's nice, or like citrusy flapjacks because it cuts through the sugary and kills off the sugar in your teeth and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, but fueling off road is definitely 100% harder. But I've always found doing a lot of it with liquid there's a really good solution around it. The only thing I'm going to care about in saying that is you have to train your stomach to make sure it's okay to take that kind of stuff on board.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
which some people, I think a lot of people don't think of that side of it. But if you think when you see all these people that go to sportifs and they're just plowing down like 10, 20 gels and then they've got the shits, like
Yeah.
there's a reason. It's because your body's not used to it. There's an imbalance. The common reason is that a lot of sports nutrition causes an imbalance of pH in your stomach, and that gives you an upset tummy.
Yeah.
There are brands that are pH neutral. Styrkr is one of them. There's several brands that do it. There's not a huge amount on the market, but there's maybe 3 or 4 other brands that do it, and they're because they are pH neutral, they don't cause that imbalance, but there can still be GI discomfort. That's the correct term for it, I'm told. There still can be some of that if your stomach is simply not used to handling that percentage of carbohydrate and being able to being used to using it. Like it's just
Yeah.
about using what you're going to use in your training all the time. Um,
Yeah.
I'm very lucky I got a mate that's a nutritionist. I've been told, it sounds like I know what I'm talking about. I'm really just like transferring what Will's told me in the past. So it's like drilled into me. But yeah, it's really hard knowing how to fuel that kind of thing and also knowing where you're going to find food.
Yeah.
Um,
There's one thing for Atlas that I was talking to Katie Jane, she was one half of the first female pair to finish Atlas. She did it in October. And I was watching this year quite a lot. I've been to Morocco twice before, so I'm quite familiar with the country. And I've been to the Atlas Mountains and things. And it's true what they're saying that once you get into the mountains, the food availability is pretty limited. It is like omelets and that's about it. And you can't even really get bread. It's
yeah,
not. It's really quite hard to get stuff there. And so I was talking to her, and she's convinced me that I'm going to be taking just a couple of freeze-dried meals and a stove, a really small stove, so that once you kind of get done with the omelets, you can actually eat something else. Because at a certain point, your body's just like, I cannot eat any more of this same thing
yeah,
again. So yeah,
yeah. There's always when I did it, it was Berber omelets and stale like flatbreads. They're always stale. And then you'd come across like little shops where you could always get like biscuits and like fake Oreos. Like Oreos are amazing rye
yeah,
fuel. They're great. They don't melt and they're tasty. But yeah, there was a lot of like omelets. Basically, it's an omelet that's covered in cumin, pretty much.
yeah,
That was kind of the deal. Salty, a bit salty, and then the bread was almost always stale. But I quite like an omelette. I'm quite partial to an omelette, so it didn't seem to affect me too much. But yeah, food is definitely harder to get, especially when you're probably in the middle of nowhere in that one. And I've from my experience, I'd probably imagine similar for you. It's always a case of just like making sure you've always got something spare just in case. Um,
yeah.
just having something in reserve in case you don't come across somewhere. And but also to say that many of these race organizers provide, I think in fact every race organizer provides an incredibly well thought through, well written, very informative handbook, which will tell you things like resupply points. But at the end
Yeah.
of the day, they don't want people being in trouble. They want people to, yes, they want people to challenge themselves and push themselves, but they still want people to enjoy the experience and be able to talk about it and share it. And I say enjoy, I mean enjoy,
Right.
um, because they want people to come back. Like it's
Mm.
part of it at the end of the day. Yeah, they're definitely lighting is one of those things that's always, I think I end up questioning quite a lot and being like, oh, I don't know if I've quite nailed it. But I think I'm the last couple where I've gone down this route with the K light stuff and spare exposure lights and then the head torch, it seems to be actually worked really well. And the head torch I've
Yeah.
got like I could strap it onto a helmet. So that's quite
Right.
nice. Does come a bit annoying when you're like at night and you've got to keep your helmet on. And you don't want to wear your helmet anymore, but you got to keep it on because you need to be able to see where you're looking.
Yeah.
The other thing that I found that my God, I never thought it'd be so useful. So I've got a Garmin. I think it's an Enduro watch. It's a watch that
Okay.
lasts like 20 days. The battery's like, how many days left have I got on it? Okay, so mine's got 22 days battery left on it. So that's incredible anyway. Um, is this?
Right. Okay.
So Garmin do tons of very, very fancy watches and they have huge varying price points. But the Enduro is like the one. So they've done the Phoenix range, which are really good. They've done the Phoenix. I used to have a Phoenix 6 Solar, which I bought it a couple of years ago. And I think it was expensive. It wasn't cheap, but it lasted about 2 weeks. The battery did, because I hate wearing heart rate straps, but I like having all that data, so I could just record it with the watch. Anyway, the Enduro, as I think it came out this year. I don't really know, but it's quite new. It's the same thing. It's got the solar thing on the Phoenix had in it, so it sort of charges itself like the new 1040 solar. I think that's what it's
So
called. Does
yeah. Yeah.
um, and now the Enduro though has. Let me just do it.
Is
A
that
little torch.
right?
It's got a
Wow.
torch in it, yeah. Which is
That's pretty cool.
so. I don't know if you can see. It's like at the top of the watch. It's so useful. I thought also you could do a red one. So uh, I didn't think it would be as useful as it is, but I used it so much at
Yeah.
Badland because yes, it kind of feels a bit weird because you're holding your watch, your wrist at a funny way to look, but when you're like setting up your campsite and stuff,
Right.
like when I got fed up with the head torch, I just use that. Or if the head torch was attached to the helmet, as I say, I just use that if I was trying to like get in the bivy bag and stuff like that. I just turn that on,
Yeah.
and it worked out really well.
Yeah.
And the red light stops all the buggies coming towards you.
Ah, that's a good tip.
Yeah, it's a expensive watch, but
Worth it.
I've been really impressed, and it lasts a month. The battery lasts a month, so like
Yeah.
that's pretty good. Like before I had the Garmin watches, I had an Apple Watch, and like you got 2 days out of it, you're winning, really. Well,
Yeah.
this thing is like cool. I could just wear it and forget about it, which is actually really quite nice. A month is a long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else regarding to what you said that I can think of stuff, tips that I've heard. I think that's kind of all of the tips I can think of from what you said.
Yeah.
I did have one question which we should talk about, which I did write up. Basically, Wendy and I wrote I say Wendy and I wrote a list. I wrote a list of stuff to you, and we've covered maybe three of them. So I'm not going to put this huge amount of pressure to cover all of them. Otherwise, this podcast is going to be like 4 hours long. Um, but we'll come back. We're planning to do more of these like ultra sort of cycling related podcasts, talking about races. And I think definitely, especially because we're going to be doing quite a few races that we're both at this year, it'd be really
Yeah.
interesting to talk about our shared experiences of them as well. Um, Sleeping at night, do you love it or do you hate it?
I love it. So I I guess this is in context of the recent announcement by our friends at Transamerica.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I am a person, I know I can't do no sleep. I have pulled 2 all-nighters in my life, and it was a catastrophe. It was not pretty at all by about 4 o'clock the next day. So I know I can't do zero sleep. But I can do little sleep. For long periods of my life, I've been able to function on 3-4 hours sleep. So I know I can do that. So when I do these kinds of things, I would so when I did TCR, for example, I would do about 4 hours sleep or 4 hours stop, and then probably like a power nap, like a 10-minute power nap in the afternoon, and I was good, and I could push through. I was okay. I think. Would you like my opinions on the
Yeah,
on the
100%. Because
Transamerica
it's
thing?
so
Yeah,
relevant to right now, isn't it?
it is. It's pretty hot. So first, I want to say, I do celebrate Transamerica and Carlos and the team for trying something new, because I think it's important. We're still a young sport. We don't have a regulatory body, which in my opinion is a good thing. So it's up to all of us to figure out, how do we want this sport to move forward? And that's great. And we're all empowered to figure out how that looks. And so everyone should, have a bash at it and have a go. So I think it's brilliant that they're trying something. That being said, I do have a few opinions on it. So I went, I did a couple of things. First of all had to, like a lot of people, I think, try and figure out the formula that they put up there as to what it actually means. What does it mean in reality?
I'll be honest, if you could explain that, it would be great, because I looked at it, I'm dyslexic, and I looked at it and went, yeah, I'm out. Or I'm out.
Yeah. So basically, the simplest way to say is, the way it will work is that for the first 72 hours, so the first 3 days, you are not obliged to do a 4-hour stop. Then within that next 24-hour period, so the 4th day or the next 24 hours, you will be obliged to do a 4-hour stop. So effectively what it means is from hour 0 to hour 86, because it kicks in at 90, I think it is, you can ride. You don't have to stop at all, which is interesting, because there are actually very, very few people, very few riders that do ride for that long without sleeping. It's a very, very small amount. There's a myth in this community, or there's a myth that's been created, that to do an ultra and to finish, you have to not sleep, which is not true. And you talk to the majority of riders, they will sleep. Talk to Sofiane, he doesn't sleep, but he's at the pointy end, and he does sleep in the longer races. So when you look at this rule, what it actually means is that within that first 86 hours is the only window where you can go and do whatever you want. And so it does raise the question, does this actually incentivize people to go hard in those first 86 hours? And that's 3.5 days, which is a long time. And I think it is a little bit dangerous. So the premise behind this rule is safety, is making it safer for people, so that through sleep deprivation, they don't do something stupid and something bad happens. The reality is, and I tried to do a little bit of research on this, and to my knowledge, no serious event has ever happened within ultracycling as a result of sleep deprivation from the rider. There have been deaths, but they're as a result of a car driver. And yes, it happened at night in the majority of cases, I think. So you could talk about the fact they were on the road at night, but it was not as a cause of sleep deprivation. So I question the fact that you've now given someone incentive to say in that first 86 hours, that's when you can go hard and you can go as long as you like. Is it actually going to incentivize people who don't know themselves so well, that think they have to do this with no sleep, that maybe are younger in the community and younger in experience in this, to push themselves hard and push themselves into a hole, and actually push themselves into a situation where they're putting themselves in more danger? So it is, I am a little bit, I'm a little bit worried about it. And so I went back and I had a look at the races just to see who will this actually impact. You look at Bazajaun, I don't know how you pronounce it. I think that's how you say it. And the Trans-Pyrenees by Transamerica, which are the shorter races. And as we know, the people that are winning these races, they finish in under 72 hours. Seb won Badlands in 44 hours something. the Trans-Iberica, the Trans-Pyrenees and Bazogram, they're done in like 3 days. So the people that are really going through sleep deprivation will not be affected by this rule because they can still do it. It's everybody that's finishing behind, and everybody that's finishing behind is stopping anyway. There's nobody that's doing 8 days in a row without it. So I went and had a look, and in 2021, the Trans-Pyrenees finishers, so I went back onto Dot Watcher where there's all the results, 30 out of the 77 finishers finished before 86 hours.
So nearly half of the field.
Exactly. So this rule is not really going to impact it. And I didn't look at that there, but I'm sure there's within those, they have stopped within that time period. Bazogram this year, 2022, 48 of the 76 finishers finished within 86 hours. So again, it's
over half of the field. Yeah.
Exactly. So I went and I looked at Trans-Iberica. So Trans-Iberica is much longer. It's somewhere between 2,500, 2,750. It's a lot of elevation. It's a much longer race. I went and had a look this year, 2022, the person that came in first. So he finished it was Guillaume. He finished in 7 days, 3 hours, his moving time was 7 days, 3 hours and 6 minutes. His stopping time was 1 day, 18 hours and 1 minute throughout the event. So I did the calculation based on what Trans-Iberica has done. So he was moving for 171 hours, which means, according to that calculation, he needed to stop for 20.5 hours. Mm-hmm. So 5 periods of 4 hours. He stopped for 42. So even the person that came in first in their longest race was still way above the minimum stopping time that they're putting in place. I didn't go and check whether there was 4-hour things or not, but it shows that this myth around sleep deprivation is a myth. It's not really a reality. And it was the same. I looked at Trans-Iberica 2021. I didn't go with Ulrich because he finished in first, but he had his problem with his derailleur, so he was out for a lot of time, so it doesn't count. It was the same with Pavel. He stopped for 26 hours, and according to the rule, he would have had to stop for 16. So he was already, and he's a very experienced rider, and he does it. So I think I'm not a huge fan of this rule because it actually doesn't change anything, and it reinforces this perception that you can only do an ultra if you don't sleep, which is not the reality at all. But I think what's really interesting of the way the community's reacted to it, which is really the bigger question here, is what Trans-Iberica have done is they've taken away choice. So a lot of people do these races because you are ultimately responsible for you at the end of the day. The organizer sets the arena, make sure that you're road legal or off-road legal, whatever it happens to be. But if you want to do whatever you want to do, you do it. And the basic guiding principle is don't be a dick. That's it. So as long as you're being a good person, you're being respectful to everybody else, you're not breaking the really obvious rules which would put you at an advantage, then go for it. And I think that's really kind of the discussion that's happening in the community at the moment. It's not about should we sleep, should we not sleep? It's about where does the organizer's role stop in dictating what a racer can and cannot do, and how do we retain the agency for the racers so that they can still feel like they can come into this and have that personal challenge, because that's what it is for the majority of us. It's a personal challenge. It's not about trying to come in first. Most of us that turn up at these races, we just want to finish. We want to go through our personal challenge, whatever that happens to be. So I think it's really interesting, and I'm curious. I'd like to hear Carlos's thought process on how he arrived at this, because he's an experienced racer. He's done very well. He himself has, does minimal sleep when he does this kind of thing.
Yeah,
I'm really interested to understand how did he get to this point, and where are we employing critical thinking in assessing, is this really the biggest problem we need to be solving for today? What data are we using to say, is sleep deprivation the problem, or is it in fact the environmental impact that we have, the lack of diversity that we have, whatever it happens to be? oh, should we be trying to address some of these bigger things other than putting in a very complicated formula? The majority of people didn't really understand in the beginning. And it's going to be greater complexity for them to police as well, because I brought this up on one of the commentaries that I did. One of the racers messaged me during GB Duro because I'd said that he hadn't stopped. According to the tracking data, it showed that he hadn't stopped. And he messaged me and said, I don't know why it says that because I stopped for an hour and I slept.
Mm.
So the accuracy of the tracking data is also not there. So how is a rider and how is the organizer going to be able to police this correctly? Because once it becomes a rule, you have to police it and you have
Of
to ensure
course.
that penalties are given in a fair way. So I'm hoping to commentate Lazer this year so that I can actually see how this really plays out in reality and what really happens. But yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to see how the community's reacted, and I think the bigger question is more about agency and choice than it
Hmm.
really is about should I sleep or should I not, which we all know is actually a non-issue. That most people actually do sleep at some point. So I don't know. You've done a lot of these. What's your take on the whole sleep aspect?
Uh, I've done a lot, and I also know that personally, having done 24-hour time trials, which is where you ride really, really, really hard for 24 hours and you don't stop and you don't get off the bike. And the goal of a 24-hour time trial for me is 500 miles. That's the goal. Anything over that is a success. If anything under is a failure. But 500 miles in 24 hours, that's always the goal. Um, so I know that I am someone that can function on probably similar 3-4 hours sleep, like day in, day out. Fine. That's okay. I don't need to have a power nap or anything. After a couple of days, I will be sluggish and a bit grumpy, but I can kind of cope with it and deal with it. I know my power numbers are no lower, like my heart rate is kind of fine. But I also know that I have one match which will allow me to ride for probably 30 to 35 hours nonstop. But I could probably use that once a year. And that's like being generous to it. Now, I I think I really like Carlos. As you say, he's very good bike racer as well. Has had some great results in some ultra races, but I think it's a bullshit rule. I think it's a non-rule. It doesn't, as you've already alluded to, it doesn't actually. So, in my opinion, no one really gives a shit where you come in an ultra outside of the top three. Yeah,
Right.
maybe the top five, but actually outside of cycling, the only one that people give a monkeys at is first. And any sort of sport, it's always first place. No one really cares after that. Outside of the top five, oh yeah, maybe, but I can't remember who came in the top five at Badlands this year, let alone last year. So like, I know one of them. I don't know who else came in those positions. And that's fine. That's just the nature of it. The fact that you're saying that there's just under half and just over half of the field that wouldn't be affected by it, that's what makes me feel like it's a non-rule. And it feels like it's kind of been done as a way of, I don't want to be negative to it, but it feels like it was done as a way to get some press and attention. And there's been some hilarious cycling memes that will come out of it as well, which is also great. But I I don't think it's necessarily in the spirit of the sport of ultra cycling. As you said, we don't have a governing body or anything. Um, and we don't have any kind of like superior thing that overarches and oversees all of them, which is why we see different rules in so many different races. And that's also part of the strength and what keeps it exciting. What I will applaud Carlos and his team for doing is by trying to do something different.
Yeah.
I think that's great. I think that's great that they're trying and they're opening up that question and that potential opportunity that this could be a discussion where they're trying something to open up the discussion as whether or not it should be controlled or whatever. I quite like how GB Duro have done it by doing it as stages. I think that's quite good because why I think that's interesting as well is because like you could just about make the stage and then have to go straight away afterwards. Like it could be that close. Depends on your positioning in that race. But I feel like it is a bit more of a non-rule personally.
Yeah.
And part of the charm of it is that some people, some people, their strength is the fact that they can't sleep, and
Yeah.
they rely on that, and that's what's helped them do well in ultra races. Like you mentioned, Sofiane is just like, I am pretty sure he's a robot. I don't care. I'm pretty sure he is a robot. Like I don't care what anyone says. He's a robot. Like
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
a lovely robot. Don't get me wrong, but he's a robot. Like there's that's his strength. That's his thing.
Yeah.
And we know that. We've seen it. That's how he does it. And fine, that's cool. But there's like you're almost obviously it's not going to affect him in his, because he's top end of the racing. But there's people who will be lower down who that's their thing that they know they can do, and it could affect how their race goes. And as you've already said, people that are coming into the sport will think that this is what has to be done, when in reality, there's probably like 10% of the field not sleeping,
Right. Right.
if that. And then 90% of them are getting a couple of hours. Like at Badlands this year, when you were talking through it, I was thinking about this year of like some of the conversations I've had with people, and there was people who were there doing their first like ultra, and I remember there's a couple of points where I was riding along and I was just chatting to people as I go past them or they go past me. You have these little conversations with people, and one of them was this young guy who was like, I found it really cringy, and I don't mean this to sound awkward, but he was like, "Oh my god, you're Chris, aren't you?" And I was like, "Yes, I am. Don't talk to me like that because it makes me feel really weird." Uh, and he was like, "What's your plan with this?" And I was like, "Well, I'm just enjoying myself. Like I'm having a laugh. I'm having a good time. I'm not, that's kind of always my stance of ultra stuff. I'm not trying to like I'm racing and enjoying it for myself." And I was like, "What's your plan?" He's like, "Yeah, I think I'm not going to sleep for 2 days, and then I'm just gonna see what happens." And I was like, "It's 3 o'clock in the morning, mate. Are you tired?" He's like, "I'm shattered." I'm like, "Well, you should probably sleep. Like
Right.
you're not proving anything to anyone by staying up." And like I said, he's like, "Well," he said to me, "What's your stance on it?" I said, "The moment how I've always done it is I'll keep riding until I make a silly mistake, and that silly mistake could just be a little slip or something like that. But that's when I'm like, oh, okay, that's the wake up call I needed. I should probably have some sleep now." Um, a lot of people will think nothing of that, but I always think that that's the point where your body's kind of, you're not sharp, you're not on
Yeah.
point. And especially at off-road stuff, that's where things can go wrong very, very quickly. I'm not
Yeah.
saying on the road they don't, because obviously in road ultras you're dealing with traffic and cars. You're not necessarily going to see that in a lot of the off-road stuff, but you're traveling on terrain which is could be, life-threatening at points. So my stance on it is kind of like I feel like it's a bit of a non-rule that similar to you could force people to go unnecessarily out of their comfort zone. Um, I really hope it doesn't. But on the same side, I think the fact that Trans-Siberica are trying this as a different angle is great, and I appreciate and applaud them for that. I think it's really good that they're trying something a bit different and just they're opening up that opportunity for people to
Yeah.
could question the idea on whether it's right or wrong, what control race organisers should have, and that's good. And ultimately, the more discussions we can have on it, and I know Carlos well enough to know that he will be taking on board what people are saying and understanding what people are
Right.
saying, and working out what he thinks is then the next big step, and that's great. But if you're in that top half or so of a race, that is pointless. It's just a way
Yeah.
of confusing the shit out of you, basically.
Yeah.
You know.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly. And this it's the adage as well. Like, I think it does need to be put in context, and it's brilliant that we are a young sport. I find sometimes the control of the voice within the sport, it definitely veers towards the younger generations, the youth. And I sound really old when I say that, but the people that have the energy coming in and they want to do things. And I think this is maybe an opportunity to bring in some of the wisdom of the people that have been doing this a long time to talk it through, because the golden adage when it comes to any endurance is it's not the fastest person that wins, it's the person that slows down the least.
Yeah.
And so it's about what can you maintain. And so going hard in those first 3 days, not sleeping, it's actually not to your benefit. Going soft in the beginning allows you to go much harder, and then maybe the last night, if you've got it, maybe you push through, because that's when the rest of the guys are all toast and you can keep going. So I think this is a really nice opportunity for discussion. I love it. Like you say, I love that Carlos is trying something and that we're getting to see this, and we're going to see how it plays out. And great, let's see what happens. And if it does also open the door for some people to feel safer coming in to do their first ultra, then great. Maybe that's something we need to take on board and say, okay, for certain people, this is a great incentive for them, because it gives them an added sense of security that they can then move on to afterwards once they realize where they are and they then figure out what they want to do. So yeah, I think it's good that it's out there. It's good that it's created some great ultra meme, just cycling meme content. It's keeping us all entertained, and yeah, we'll see what happens next year in 2023 with them.
Whoever it is that runs that ultra cycling meme thing, I'm going to find it now. Also, I'm just going to pick up the ultra distance scholarship again, because that's awesome, because it's the first thing that comes up when I search for ultra on my phone. But yeah, ultra cycling memes. Whoever it is that runs this is a freaking genius. I don't know who runs it, but genuinely, I look at a lot of these kind of like cycling meme ones, and normally I'm like, huh. But this one, I think because I could actually resonate with so many of them, that they genuinely make me laugh quite a lot. The BBC News ones about there was one that was talking about I think it was Silk Road, Kyrgyzstan being renamed as Washboardistan. I think it was. I was like,
yeah.
yep,
It was a Rhino run, yeah.
it's so great. It's so true. Like, there's whoever's doing that page is a genius. Like, well done, whoever you are.
There's a
And
few clues. There is a few clues in the content to just point you to who it is. I'm just going to leave that out there.
maybe I should. Maybe I should actually have been paying more attention instead of just laughing at them.
No, but they are quality. The author does a good job of keeping themselves anonymous, but when you know who it is,
it makes sense.
The clue, yeah.
Oh, it's clearly someone who has a good knowledge of ultra races. Let's just say that. Whether that is doing them or organizing them, I don't know. Anyway, I'm very conscious that we've been talking for a very long time, and I'm going to wrap it up there.
Yeah, it's
So
been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed chatting to you.
Thank you, Wendy, so much. Please, if you haven't read any of Wendy's race commentary, please go and read them. They're brilliant. They're just very. Do you know, you read, it's like it's chatting to a mate, and that's what I really like about it. It's quite like informal and quite funny. There's a bit slapsticky bits in them. I very much enjoyed the reports of Matt Faulkner's ice cream content, which I think everyone enjoys knowing how many ice creams he's had. I love Matt. He's a really good friend.
Yeah.
Equally, I think Sean and Alvin at Badlands this year very much enjoyed the fact that they were pronounced as the best dressed. And I mean, their outfit was
Definitely
great.
were.
It was great. But yeah, please go and check out some of that commentary and some of the other stuff Wendy's doing. We are gonna aim to try and do these more regularly, and we're also going to talk about some other things that you're involved in the new year, which should be really interesting. It's a thing called Turning the Cogs. If you don't know it, also check that out on social media, website, everywhere. But there's nothing really to check out right now, because there's going to be a big push in the new year, as we've already discussed. But go check it out. Go check out the commentary, and we're gonna do. I'll create another random list of things, and we'll start talking about it at some point in the near future.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed chatting. It's good to get your perspective. I've got some tips now for Atlas as well, and yeah, looking forward to our next chats, and then finally meeting you in person, hopefully in Morocco.
Yeah, bloody hell, it's not long away.
No, it's not.
Yeah, I should probably be feeling more prepared. Anyway, thank you so much.
Super. Thanks a lot, Chris.